The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and Una Park stepped onto Station Villa 7 for the first time in her life. She was 16 years old, small for her age, with black hair tied back in a simple ponytail and dark eyes that watched everything around her with quiet attention. The station stretched before her like a city, made of light and metal, filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. Walking through corridors that seemed to go on for Varen had seen pictures before, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of standing in a place where humans were the strangest creatures inside. A tall figure with blue skin and 4 arms passed by her without a second glance. A floating sphere, covered in glowing symbols, drifted overhead, making soft humming sounds as it moved too. Creatures that looked like walking trees were having a conversation in clicks and whistles near the entrance to the main corridor. Una took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was here. Her father was a diplomat assigned to this station, and she had begged him to let her attend the Galactic Integration Academy. Instead of studying remotely from their quarters, she wanted to see the galaxy, to meet other species, to prove that humans could belong among the stars, just like everyone else. Now that she was actually here, surrounded by aliens who towered over her or floated past her or regarded her with curious, multifaceted eyes, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The Academy building was located in the upper levels of the station, a massive structure of white walls and open spaces designed to accommodate students of every size and shape. Una followed the directions on her personal device until she reached the main entrance, where a holographic sign welcomed new students in dozens of languages. The human translation read, "Welcome to Galactic Integration Academy, where tomorrow's leaders learn together." She walked through the doors and found herself in a hall filled with young beings from across the galaxy. Some were talking in groups, their voices creating a constant background noise of chirps and growls and musical tones. Others were rushing to class, their various forms of movement creating a chaotic dance of legs and tentacles and hovering bodies. And almost all of them stopped to stare when they noticed Una. Had expected curiosity, but the intensity of their attention surprised her. Whispers followed her as she walked toward the administration office, and she caught fragments of conversation that made her stomach tight with discomfort. "Is that a human? Deathworlder. My parent told me about them. They eat flesh. Actual dead flesh. I heard they can survive in poison air and crushing gravity." Una kept her eyes forward and her expression neutral, pretending she could not hear them, pretending their words did not bother her. She had known this would happen, but knowing something and experiencing it were very different things. The administration office was a small room filled with floating screens and a single desk where a creature like a giant spider sat, clicking at a keyboard with its many legs. It looked up when Una entered and made a sound that her translator turned into a warm greeting. "Human student Una Park. We have been expecting you," the spider creature said, its mandibles moving in patterns that did not match the translated words at all. "Your schedule has been prepared and your quarters assigned. I hope you will find your time here educational and enriching." Una thanked the administrator and collected her information, then made her way to her first class with her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. The classroom was already half full when she arrived, and once again every eye turned to watch her enter. She found an empty seat near the back of the room and sat down quickly, hoping to avoid attention. It did not work. A shadow fell over her desk, and Una looked up to find herself staring at a Velthari student. She had read about the Velthari before coming here. They were tall, silver-skinned beings with powerful telepathic abilities and a long history of political influence in this sector of space. This particular Velthari was male, with sharp features and eyes that glowed faintly purple, and he was looking at Una the way someone might look at an insect that had crawled into their food. "So this is the human," he said, his voice smooth and cold. I am Terex, son of Counselor Vareth, and I want you to understand something from the beginning." He leaned down until his face was close to hers, and Yuna felt a strange pressure against her mind, like fingers trying to push through a door. "This academy has standards," Terex continued. "We accept students from civilized worlds, students with culture and history and proper mental development. Not primitive creatures from death worlds who learned to walk upright only a few generations ago." Yuna said nothing, but she did not look away from his glowing eyes. The pressure against her mind increased, and she realized he was trying to read her thoughts, trying to see what she was feeling. He would find nothing but a wall. "You should have stayed on your savage little planet," Terex said, straightening up with a look of frustration on his silver face. "But since you are here, learn your place and stay out of my way, or I will teach you lessons you will never forget." He walked away to join a group of other Velthari students, who laughed at something he said while glancing back at Yunash, turned her attention to her desk, and kept her face perfectly calm. Giving them nothing to see, the class passed slowly, and Yuna absorbed the information about galactic history while ignoring the occasional whisper or pointed look from other students. When the session ended, she gathered her things and walked toward her next class, already planning the quickest routes through the corridors to avoid unnecessary contact. She was halfway down the hall when she heard a crash and a small cry of distress around the corner. She found Terex and his friends standing over a much smaller student of Finari. She recognized a species known for their forearms and their gentle, timid nature. The Finari was on the ground, his supplies scattered around him, and he was trembling as Terex kicked his belongings further away. "Clumsy little creature," Terex said with a cruel smile. "Perhaps you should watch where you are going instead of bumping into your betters." The other students in the hallway walked past without stopping, their eyes fixed straight ahead as if they could not see what was happening. Juno watched for a moment, and something inside her went very still and very cold. She walked forward, knelt beside the Finari, and began gathering his scattered supplies. The corridor went silent. Terex stared at her with disbelief that slowly transformed into anger, his purple eyes flashing brighter. "What do you think you are doing, human?" Yuna handed the supplies back to the Finari and helped him stand, noting how badly he was shaking. "I am helping someone who fell down," she said in a flat voice. "Is that not allowed here?" The Finari, his name was Keth, she would learn later, looked at her with huge grateful eyes before hurrying away down the corridor. Terex stepped closer to Yuna, and the pressure against her mind returned, harder than before. "You have made a mistake," he said softly, "a very serious mistake, and you will regret it." Yuna looked up at him without flinching, without showing any fear at all. "Maybe," she said, "or maybe you do not know as much about humans as you think you do." She walked away before he could respond, feeling his hatred burning against her back like heat from a fire. She had made an enemy on her first day, and she knew that Terex would not forget or forgive. But as she walked to her next class, Yuna found that she did not regret what she had done, not even a little bit. She had come to this academy to prove that humans could belong among the stars, and she was not going to do that by standing aside while someone was hurt, whatever came next. She would face it the way humans had always faced their challenges, with patience, with planning, and with a will that refused to break. Terex thought she was prey because she was small and alone and far from her homeworld. He had no idea how wrong he was. The days that followed were difficult in ways that Yuna had not expected. Terex and his group did not attack her directly. They were too smart for that, too aware that open violence would bring consequences even they could not escape. Instead, they waged a quiet war of small cruelties designed to make her life as miserable as possible. It started with minor things, incidents that could almost be dismissed as accidents or coincidences. Yuna would walk down a corridor and suddenly stumble for no reason, feeling a strange push against her balance that came from inside her own head. Her food would taste wrong, contaminated with substances that made her stomach ache for hours. Her assignments would disappear from the system, forcing her to redo work she had already completed. The other students began avoiding her, and she quickly understood why Derricks had spread rumors about humans, stories about diseases they carried, about their violent nature, about the dangerous bacteria that lived on their skin. None of it was true. But truth mattered less than fear. And soon Yuna found herself eating alone and walking to class through empty corridors, while others took different routes to avoid her. She documented everything, every incident, every rumor, every small act of cruelty went into a secure file on her personal device. She recorded dates and times and the names of witnesses, building a careful record of what was being done to her. When she showed the file to her father one evening, he read through it with an expression that shifted from concern to anger to something that looked like pride. "You are handling this exactly right," he told her. "In diplomacy, we learn that information is power, and the patient gathering of evidence is more valuable than any emotional reaction." "The teachers will not help me," Yuna said. "I tried talking to Administrator Vorith, but she said she could not act without proof. And every time something happens, there are no witnesses willing to speak." Her father nodded slowly, his experienced eyes understanding the situation perfectly. "Counselor, Vareth has influence over half the administrators on this station," he said. "His son knows he is protected, which makes him dangerous, but also careless. And careless enemies eventually make mistakes. So I just wait," Yuna said. "And it was not a question. You wait, and you watch, and you prepare," her father agreed. "And when the moment comes, you will be ready." The next day, Yuna found Keth waiting for her outside her quarters. The small Fenari looked nervous, his four hands twisting together in anxious patterns. But there was determination in his large eyes. "I wanted to thank you," he said in his soft voice, "for helping me that day. No one has ever done that before." Yuna walked with him toward the academy, matching her pace to his shorter stride. "How long has Terex been doing this to you?" Keth's ears flattened against his head in a gesture of distress. "Since my first year," he said. 3 cycles now, and he does it to many of us. The smaller species, the ones without political protection." He told her stories as they walked, stories of students who had been hospitalized after accidents that were never investigated, of transfers that happened suddenly when victims complained too loudly, of a system that protected the powerful and silenced the weak. "There was a Fenari named Mira last year," Keth said quietly. "She tried to report what Terex did to her, and the next week she fell from a balcony in the recreation area, and everyone called it an accident. But I saw the bruises on her arms before they took her to medical." Yuna felt that cold stillness settle inside her again, the same feeling she had experienced on her first day. "Where does he take them?" she asked. "When he wants to do something without being seen." Keth hesitated, fear flickering across his face. "The detention wing," he finally said. "On the lower level, the cameras there have been broken for years, and no one has fixed them. And sometimes students go there and come back different, quieter, more afraid." Yuna filed this information away in her mind alongside everything else she had gathered that evening. She accessed the station's public records and found the maintenance logs for the detention wing. The camera system had been reported as malfunctioning 17 times in the past 4 years, and every repair request had been denied due to budget constraints. She also noticed that the administrator who denied those requests was the same one who had dismissed her complaints about Terex. The pattern was clear, and now she knew exactly where the danger would come from. 2 weeks later, the trap was sprung. Yuna arrived at her locker between classes and found it already open, with security officers waiting beside it. Inside, hidden among her belongings, was a small container of illegal stimulants, drugs that were banned on the station and carried Serious penalties for possession, Yuna Park, the lead officer said. You are being detained for possession of controlled substances. Please come with us. She went quietly, knowing that resistance would only make things worse as she was led away. She passed Terex, standing with his friends in the corridor, and he did not even try to hide his smile. Such a shame, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I always knew humans could not be trusted among civilized beings. The hearing was brief, and predetermined Administrator Varth presided, her expression carefully neutral as she reviewed the evidence and listened to the security report. Yuna explained that the drugs were not hers, that she had been framed, that her locker had been broken into. The administrator nodded sympathetically, and then announced that without proof of tampering, she had no choice but to impose the standard punishment. 3 days in the detention wing, Varth declared, where you will have time to reflect on your choices and the consequences of bringing illegal substances onto this station. Yuna's father was not present. He was off station for diplomatic meetings, a timing that she suspected was not coincidental. She was escorted to the detention wing by 2 security officers who seemed uncomfortable with their duty but unwilling to question their orders. The wing was exactly as Keth had described, a cold, sterile place with flickering lights and an atmosphere of neglect. They put her in a small cell and told her that meals would be delivered twice a day. And then they left her alone. Yuna sat on the hard bench that served as a bed and waited. She knew what was coming. 3 hours later, she heard footsteps in the corridor, not the heavy tread of security officers, but the softer sounds of expensive shoes on metal floors. The door to her cell opened, and Terex walked in with 4 of his followers behind him. They were all smiling. No cameras here, Terex said, spreading his arms wide. No witnesses, no records. Just you and us and all the time in the world. His friends moved to block the doorway, cutting off any chance of escape. I have been looking forward to this since the day you arrived, Terex continued, his purple eyes beginning to glow brighter. You embarrassed me in front of the entire school. You helped that pathetic Fanari. You refused to show proper respect to your betters. He stepped closer, and Yuna felt the familiar pressure against her mind, stronger than ever before. Humans think they are so special, he said. Deathworlders, survivors, the species that refuses to die. But you have no telepathic abilities, no mental defenses, and right now you are completely alone. He smiled, and it was the cruelest expression Yuna had ever seen. I am going to reach into your mind and show you every fear you have ever felt, he said. Every nightmare, every moment of pain and terror. And when I am finished, you will crawl out of this place and never speak a word against me again. Yuna looked up at him with steady eyes. You should have done your research, she said quietly. Terex laughed and reached for her mind with all his telepathic power, confident in his superiority, absolutely certain of his victory. He had no idea what he was about to find. Terex pushed into Yuna's mind, expecting to find something simple. The Velthari had encountered many species over the centuries, and most of them had minds like open books, easy to read, easy to manipulate, easy to break. Human minds were supposed to be even simpler. Primitive structures from a primitive world. What he found was something completely different. The moment his telepathic power touched Yuna's consciousness, he felt resistance, not a wall exactly, but something more like a maze. A twisting labyrinth of thoughts and memories and defenses that shifted and changed even as he tried to push through. He pressed harder, using techniques that had shattered stronger beings. Then this small human girl, and then the maze pushed back. Yuna had learned something about human minds during her research before coming to this station. Humans had evolved on a world full of predators. A world where survival depended on reading each other's intentions and hiding their own over millions of years. They had developed something unique, a mental flexibility born from constant social competition, from the need to deceive and detect deception, from a culture built on storytelling and imagination and dreams. Every human mind was a fortress wrapped in stories, and Yuna had spent her entire life filling her fortress with the darkest stories humanity had ever created. Tetrix wanted to show her fear, so she showed him fear. First images hit his mind like a wave, pulled from deep in Yuna's memory, where she had stored every horror story she had ever read, every nightmare she had ever dreamed, every dark corner of human imagination. He saw monsters that crawled in the darkness, things with too many teeth and too many eyes. He saw wars that consumed entire continents, fire falling from the sky, cities reduced to ash. He saw the predators that had hunted humanity's ancestors, the ancient fears that still lived in human blood after thousands of generations. He saw what humans were capable of doing to each other, cruelties that made his own bullying look like children's games. Trix screamed, tried to pull out of her mind, but she held him there, turning his own telepathic connection into a trap. The other Valkyrie rushed forward to help their leader, adding their mental power to his, trying to break Yuna's grip one by one. They touched her mind and found the same thing waiting for them. The second Valkyrie encountered a memory of deep water, endless and black, with something massive moving in the depths below, a fear so primal that his species had no defense against it. The third found himself lost in a maze of mirrors where every reflection showed a different version of himself, each one more twisted than the last, and he could not tell which one was real. The fourth touched a memory of isolation, of being utterly alone in an infinite void where no one could hear him. No matter how loud he screamed, one of them collapsed completely, his mind overwhelmed by sensations his species had never evolved to handle. Another stumbled backward, clutching his head and making sounds that were not words. Terix managed to tear himself free from Yuna's mind, but his face had gone pale and his hands were shaking. What are you?" he gasped. Yuna stood up slowly, and even though she was the smallest person in the room, something had changed. She was not the one who looked afraid. "Humans dream," she said, her voice calm and steady. "Every night, we close our eyes and our minds create entire worlds from nothing. And sometimes those worlds are beautiful, but sometimes they are terrible beyond anything you can imagine." She took a step toward Terix, and he actually backed away from her. "You thought you could break me by showing me my fears," she continued. "But I have lived with my fears my whole life, and I have learned to make them my weapons instead of my weaknesses." One of the Volthuri, the one who had not yet touched her mind, lunged forward with his hands reaching for her throat. He was bigger than her, stronger than her, faster than her in every way that should have mattered. But Yuna had trained in martial arts since she was 7 years old on Earth, in gravity that would crush these silver-skinned aliens. She had learned to fight against opponents twice her size. She moved with the speed that evolution had given her species, the reflexes of a Deathworlder who had survived a planet that tried to kill every living thing on it. Her hand caught his wrist and twisted, using his own momentum against him. Her foot swept his legs out from under him. Elbow struck the nerve cluster at the base of his neck. He hit the floor before he even understood what was happening, and he did not get back up. The remaining Valkyrie stared at her in absolute terror. "I did not come here looking for trouble," Yuna said, standing over their fallen friend. "I came here to learn, to grow, to prove that humans can work alongside other species, but you would not let me be peaceful." She looked at Terix, who was pressed against the wall like he wanted to sink through it and disappear. "You called me primitive. You called me an animal. You thought that being human made me weak and easy to hurt. But humans are the most dangerous thing our planet ever produced." She walked toward him slowly, and he flinched with every step she took. "We are persistence hunters who can run for days without stopping," she said. We eat foods that would poison other species. We survive injuries that would kill anything else. We adapt to every environment, from frozen wastelands to burning deserts. She stopped right in front of him, close enough to touch, and we protect our own. She finished quietly. The Fenari, the small ones, the weak ones, the ones you have been hurting for years, they are mine now, and if you ever touch any of them again, I will make sure everyone on this station knows exactly what kind of person you really are. Terex opened his mouth to say something. A threat, perhaps, or a plea for mercy, but before he could speak, Yuna reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. Do you know what this is? She asked. His eyes widened as he recognized it. It is a personal recorder, she said. Standard issue for the children of diplomats. Designed to document everything in case of emergency. And it has been running since I walked into this cell. The color drained from his face completely. Every word you said, every threat you made, every confession about what you have done to other students, all of it recorded. All of it stored in a secure file that is already being transmitted to multiple locations outside this station. She smiled. And there was no warmth in it at all. You thought you were safe because there were no cameras here, she said. You thought you could do whatever you wanted because no one would ever know. But you forgot one very important thing about humans. She leaned closer and spoke the next words very clearly. We plan ahead. Terex slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. All the arrogance and cruelty gone from his face. In its place was the expression of someone who had finally realized that they had made a terrible mistake. Yuna stepped back and looked at the other Valkyrie, who were helping their injured friends and watching her with fear in their glowing eyes. Go, she said simply. They went, dragging Terex with them. Leaving Yuna alone in the cell, she sat back down on the bench and let out a long breath, finally allowing her hands to shake now that no one could see. She had won, but the real battle was just beginning. Yuna did not sleep that night. She sat in her cell and watched the small screen of her personal device as the recording uploaded to 7 different secure locations. Her father's diplomatic server, the station security database, the Galactic Education Council's complaint system, and 4 independent news organizations that specialize in stories about corruption and abuse by morning. The first responses had already begun arriving. Her father's message was short and direct. I am proud of you. Hold your position. Help is coming. The station security response was more complicated, a formal notification that her recording was being reviewed and that she should remain in her cell until further. Notice the news organizations were the fastest to act, as she had known they would be within hours. The story was spreading across the communication networks, and Yuna could see the headlines forming even from inside her cell. Human student exposes years of abuse at prestigious academy. Counselor's son recorded confessing to multiple assaults. Telepathic attack on human child backfires. Spectacularly, the door to her cell opened at midday, and Administrator Vareth walked in with an expression that shifted between anger and fear. Do you have any idea what you have done? She demanded. The chaos you have caused, the damage to this institution's reputation. I have exposed the truth, Yuna interrupted calmly. Something that should have been done years ago. Vareth's face twisted with frustration. Counselor Vareth is furious. He's demanded that all charges against his son be dropped, that your recording be classified as illegally obtained evidence. My father is a diplomat, Yuna said, and I am a minor who was attacked by multiple students while in official custody and under galactic standard law. Personal recordings made during assault are automatically admissible as evidence. She had researched this very carefully before allowing herself to be captured. Vareth stared at her for a long moment, and Yuna could see the administrator calculating her options and finding none that led anywhere good. You planned this, Vareth said finally, And it was not a question. Tarek spent weeks making my life miserable, Yuna replied. He contaminated my food, sabotaged my work, spread rumors about my species, and finally planted drugs in my locker to have me arrested, and you helped him every step of the way. The administrator's face went pale. I have the maintenance logs showing that you denied 17 requests to fix the cameras in this wing. Yuna continued. I have records of other students who complained about Tarek's and were transferred or disciplined shortly after. And I have the names of 3 former students who were willing to testify about what happened to them in this very room. She had spent weeks building her case, gathering evidence, reaching out to victims through secure channels that Tarek's group could not monitor. You protected him because his father is powerful, Yuna said. You let him hurt people because it was easier than standing up to a counselor, but that ends today. 2 hours later, security officers arrived to escort Yuna out of the detention wing, not as a prisoner, but as a witness. The investigation had officially begun over the next 3 days. The academy transformed into something Yuna barely recognized. Students who had been silent for years suddenly found their voices, coming forward with stories of harassment and abuse that painted a picture far worse than anyone had imagined. Keth was one of the first to speak publicly, his small form trembling, but his voice steady as he described what Tarek's had done to him and others like him. I was afraid to say anything, he told the investigator. I thought no one would believe me. I thought they would find a way to make me disappear, like they did with Myra. But then I saw Yuna stand up against them, and I realized that if a human could be that brave, then maybe I could be brave too. Other Phanari followed him, then students from other small species. Then even some Velthari who had witnessed Tarek's cruelty and been too afraid to report it. The evidence was overwhelming. Tarek's was formally charged with assault, telepathic violation, and conspiracy, along with 3 of his followers who had participated in the attack on Yuna. Administrator Vorath was suspended pending investigation into her role in covering up years of abuse. Counselor Vorath tried everything to protect his son. Political pressure, legal threats, even attempts to discredit Yuna and the other witnesses, but the recording was too clear, the testimony too consistent, the pattern too obvious to ignore. The Galactic Education Council stepped in directly, appointing an independent overseer to manage the academy until proper reforms could be implemented. On the 4th day, Yuna was called to witness Tarek's being escorted off the station. He was surrounded by security officers, his hands bound in front of him, his silver face empty of all the arrogance she had seen before. She walked up to him as he passed, and the security officers paused to let her speak. Tarek's flinched when he saw her. Actually flinched, like she was the monster and he was the victim. Do you know what the hardest part of this was? Yuna asked him quietly. He did not answer, but she continued anyway. The hardest part was not fighting you or your friends, and it was not sitting in that cell waiting for you to attack me. The hardest part was deciding what kind of person I wanted to be when it was over. She looked at him steadily, and he could not meet her eyes. I could have destroyed you completely, she said. I could have released information that would have ruined your father's career. I could have pushed your mind so hard that you never recovered. I could have made you suffer the way you made so many others suffer. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. But that is not who I am, and that is not what humans should be known for. Tarek's finally looked up at her, and there was something in his expression that might have been confusion or might have been the beginning of understanding. I am not going to hurt you, Yuna said. I am not going to take revenge beyond what justice requires, because humans learned long ago that the best revenge is making sure you can never hurt anyone else again. She stepped back and nodded to the security officers. Take him. They led Tarek's away, and Yuna watched until he disappeared around the corner. Kath appeared at her side a moment later. His four hands clasped together in the Fanari gesture of deep respect. "You could have done so much worse to him," Keth said softly. "Why did you let him go with just words?" Yuna thought about the question for a moment before answering. "Because cruelty is a cycle," she said. "Someone hurts you, so you hurt someone else. And then they hurt someone else. And it never stops, but mercy can break that cycle." She looked down at her small friend. "Terex hurt people because he thought it made him powerful," she continued. "If I had tortured him in return, I would have been proving him right. And I would have become the same kind of monster he was." Keth was quiet for a long moment. "Humans are strange," he finally said. Yuna laughed a real laugh. The first one she had allowed herself since this whole nightmare began. "Yes," she agreed. "We really are." 6 months passed, and the Galactic Integration Academy became a different place. The changes started small new cameras installed throughout the station, including the detention wing, with maintenance contracts that could not be canceled by any single administrator. Then came the policy reforms, drafted by a committee that included students from every species represented at the academy, including one human girl whose reputation had spread far beyond the station's walls. Yuna had not asked to become a symbol, but she found that the role fit her better than she had expected. She served on 3 student committees, advised the new administration on anti-harassment protocols, and somehow still managed to keep up with her coursework despite the constant demands on her time. The hardest part was the attention news, organizations across the sector-wide interviews. Educational boards wanted her to speak at conferences, and politicians wanted to be seen with the human girl who had brought down a counselor's son. She turned down most of the requests, preferring to focus on the work that actually mattered. The slow, difficult process of building something better from the wreckage of what had come before. Her father watched her navigate this new world with a mixture of pride and concern. "Have accomplished something remarkable," he told her one evening as they shared dinner in their quarters. "But you are also 16 years old, and you should not have to carry the weight of an entire reform movement on your shoulders." Yuna smiled at him over her plate of synthesized rice and vegetables. "I am not carrying it alone," she said. "Keth does more work than I do most days, and there are students from every species who want to help." It was truth. Movement she had started had grown beyond anything she could have imagined, spreading to other academies on other stations, inspiring reforms in schools across the sector. Students who had been victims were becoming advocates, using their experiences to help others who were suffering in silence. Keth had become the leader of a student advocacy group that now had chapters on 7 different stations, providing support and resources for victims of bullying and abuse. The small Fanari, who had once been too afraid to speak, had found his voice, and he was using it to change the galaxy one school at a time. "You know," Keth told her one day as they walked through the academy corridors, "when I first met you, I thought you were going to get yourself killed." Yuna laughed at the memory. "I almost did," she admitted. "There were moments in that cell when I was not sure my plan would work. What if my mental defenses had not been strong enough? What if Terex had decided to attack me physically from the beginning instead of trying telepathy first? What if my recording had been discovered before I could transmit it?" She shook her head at her own recklessness. "I got lucky in some ways, but I also prepared as much as I could. And I think that is the lesson. You cannot control everything that happens to you, but you can control how ready you are to face it." Keth nodded thoughtfully, his forearms gesturing in the Fanari pattern that indicated deep agreement. "My grandmother always said that courage is not the absence of fear," he said. "It is the decision that something else is more important than fear." That is a wise grandmother. She survived 3 wars and 2 plagues, Keth said with quiet pride. She knows what she is talking about. They stopped at the entrance to the main hall, where a crowd had gathered around a shuttle that had just arrived from Off station, a new transfer student was stepping off the shuttle, a human boy, maybe 14 years old, with nervous eyes and shoulders hunched against the stares of the surrounding aliens. Yuna watched him for a moment. Remembering her own arrival 6 months ago, she had been that scared, that uncertain, that convinced she had made a terrible mistake. "Wait here," she told Kath, and walked toward the crowd. The aliens parted for her automatically, not from fear anymore, but from something that looked more like respect. She reached the human boy just as he was fumbling with his bags, clearly overwhelmed by the attention and the unfamiliar environment. "You must be Jae-min," she said. Having seen his name on the transfer list earlier that week, he looked up at her with wide eyes that grew even wider when he recognized who she was. "You are Yuna Park," he stammered. "I read about you. Everyone has read about you. You are the one who... I am the one who is going to show you around the academy," she interrupted gently. "If you would like some help getting settled." The relief on his face was almost painful to see. "Yes. Please. I have no idea where anything is, and everyone keeps staring at me. And I did not think there would be so many different species." "And take a breath," Yuna said with a small smile. "It is overwhelming at first, but you will get used to it faster than you think." She helped him collect his bags and guided him through the corridors, pointing out important locations and explaining the unwritten rules of station life. Other students watched them pass, and Yuna noticed something different in their expressions. Not the fear or hostility she had faced when she arrived, but curiosity and even warmth. "They are not looking at me like I expected," Jae-min said quietly, clearly noticing the same thing. "They are looking at you like a human," Yuna said. "And thanks to some hard work by a lot of people. That means something different now than it used to." She stopped at the entrance to the student quarters and turned to face him directly. "Listen to me carefully," she said. "You are going to have good days and bad days here. And there will be times when you feel alone, and times when you feel like you do not belong, but you do belong. And you are not alone, and if anyone ever makes you feel otherwise, you come find me." Jae-min straightened a little, some of the fear leaving his eyes. "Is it true what they say about you?" he asked. "That you defeated 5 Veltri telepaths by yourself?" Yuna considered the question. "I defended myself against 5 Veltri who made the mistake of thinking humans were weak," she said. "And I exposed their crimes so they could never hurt anyone else. But the real victory was not the fight. And it was not even the reforms that came after. Then what was it?" Yuna looked out the window at the station around them. The aliens of a dozen species walking together. The students laughing and arguing in groups that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. The future taking shape, one small change at a time. The real victory was showing them what humans can be, she said. Not monsters from a death world. Not primitive savages who only know violence, but people who stand up for the weak, who fight for justice, who choose mercy even when revenge would be easier. She turned back to Jae-min and put a hand on his shoulder. "You are going to help show them that too," she said. "Just by being here, just by being yourself. You are proving that humans deserve our place among the stars." The boy stood a little taller. "I will do my best," he said. "That is all any of us can do." Yuna walked away, leaving him to begin his own journey at the academy behind her. She heard other students approaching Jae-min, not to threaten or mock, but to welcome him, to offer help, to include him in conversations that crossed species boundaries. It was a small moment, easily overlooked, but to Yuna it meant everything. She had come to this station alone and afraid, marked as a target by those who saw her species as inferior. She had fought back not with violence, but with patience and planning. Not with cruelty, but with justice. Not with revenge, but with the determination to create something better. And now, 6 months later, a new human student could walk into the academy and be greeted with respect instead of fear. That was her legacy. That was the revenge that no one had seen coming, not destruction, but transformation. Not breaking her enemies, but building a world where their cruelty could never take root. Again, Yuna smiled to herself and headed to class. Ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring, she was human. After all, challenges were what her species did best.